Welcome to this week's edition of Good Books Radio. Audiobooks.com is the chief underwriter for Good Books Radio, which is produced by UTRGV Media Services for Rio Grande Valley Public Radio. And now, here's your host, Dr. John Cook.
And welcome once again to another edition of Good Books. I'm your host this week, Dr. John Cook, and with me today is Nancy Torgove Clasby. She's been a pioneer practitioner of spirituality and healing since 1998. In addition to her private healing practice, she's a Reiki, polarity, craniosacral practitioner, as well as an ARCB certified reflexologist. She's helped hundreds overcome chronic and terminal illnesses, often leading her clients on a path of self-healing, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual in nature. She has a BA from Lesley University in Cambridge in 1980, and she spent many years as a teacher focusing on children with special needs. Her prior work includes recordings of guided healing meditations, and she is a sought-after meditation teacher. Nancy lives in a small Massachusetts town on the Atlantic Ocean with 2 white fluffy cats, a brown dog, and surrounded by lots of family and lifelong friends. I love that. She loves to ride her pink bike, swim in the ocean, knit, and bake pies, but mostly she loves to be with her family. You can download Nancy's CD, Healing Meditations with Nancy Torgove Clasby, on iTunes, and also visit her website. This is a long one, nancyclasbyhealingandmeditation.com. And the book we're going to talk about today is The Reluctant Mystic. The Reluctant Mystic, an autobiography of awakening. Nancy, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me, John. I'm so excited to be here.
This is a great book and an easy read. I was fascinated by some of the early stuff in the book about how you had some psychic experiences before that time on the massage therapist table when you really connected with the divine. And I know that you had struggled with back pain in your early years. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. My internal experiences have taught me that the way that we are able to expand into greater versions of who we are is very often through the body. Mm-hmm. We live in physical bodies here, so for me, it was my back pain that really taught me so much. At a very young age, I had to learn how to move into the center of my breathing and breathe through incredible pain. And it was through that internal knowing and awareness that I started to expand into areas in my life that I never knew were possible. Mm-hmm.
Well, I have some experiences in common with you in that due to some pain, I have an acupuncturist girlfriend, and I'm going to see a chiropractor next week, and I see massage therapists all the time. But during one of your treatments for back pain, you recognized that something terrible was going to happen when you felt a pain in the back of your head and lost your sister-in-law later.
Yeah. So for me, like you said, when I was a very small child, I had a lot of what I now know are called psychic experiences. But when I was growing up, I just thought it was part of who I was. You know how some people have curly hair and some people have green eyes, and I just thought it was a natural, organic part of who I am. And so I never really told anyone about it. And I was given this intense backache at a very young age. By the time I was 12 years old, I wasn't able to sit or walk or stand for long periods of time. And between the ages of 12 and 16, excuse me, I had to really learn a lot of big answers. Mm-hmm. I had a lot of big questions. When my friends were out doing all kinds of physical activities, I was not allowed to do those things. So as a result, I learned how to move into the center of my pain. And it was in the center of my pain that I really found divinity. Because when you're in so much pain that you can't breathe, you can't eat, you can't move, you can't sit, you can't stand, everything else seems to let go in the world. I wasn't able to focus on anything else but the very moment that I was in. And the very moment that I was in was so intense that I had to learn a way to cope with that intense pain. And so for me, what happened was it all imploded into what I now know as a mystical experience. So when I had to let go of everything but my breath, I wound up being in a place of complete stillness and found a place of incredible peace.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my experience. I found God in the center of my pain.
Mm-hmm. And that was really powerfully discussed. You talk about what the Hindus call the Kundalini energy, and the energy expanding. And on the table, where you were getting the therapy, you could see from your third eye, from the inner eye, the energy center that everyone has it. Then this eye sits in the middle of the forehead, and it's the seat of intuition. And we've done interviews with folks who talk about spiritual intuition in the third eye, but I was fascinated by how you recognized how completely accepted and loved you were.
Yes. So what happened to me was, over a period of 6 weeks, my body started to shake involuntarily. And I didn't really know what it was, but it felt wonderful. My whole body would shake. You could visibly see me shaking. And then it culminated in that out-of-body experience where I left my body, although at the same time I knew I was in my body. And what I could see was a vision on the inside of my forehead, which is now I later found out was called the third eye. And if you take a minute, everyone can feel it. Sometimes it's located right between the eyebrows, and sometimes it's located a little bit further up on the forehead. And if you take just a minute, you'll feel a little bit of a tingling or a warmth, or maybe a little bit of a sensation there. At the time that I had that out-of-body experience, every energy center in my body blasted wide open, and at the same time, I could see the room I was in, but I could also see this incredible light. And it was as though I were downloaded with information in about 45 minutes. And it felt like all the wisdom in the world poured through me in those 45 minutes. And then what happened was, over the period of the next few years, that wisdom started to come out through me and work its way into the world.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about those few months after that experience, because that's really interesting too. It's you saw the world bathed in a turquoise light. You weren't sure how in the world you could drive. You didn't know if your hands could fit the wheel. It was like, and you saw auras. I mean, and for months you didn't eat.
I know, this part of the story always makes me laugh, because I know that if I was listening to it, I would think, oh yeah, right, like that really happened. But the things that happened to me sound so magical, and yet I realized many years later, when I started reading accounts of mystical experiences, that they were all very common to anyone that has a mystical experience of a profound magnitude. So a lot of those things sound like hocus pocus, but in fact, they do happen to a lot of people that have mystical experiences. When you think of Jacob climbing the ladder to heaven, you think, well, really, was there a ladder there?
Mm-hmm.
And what did Jacob experience when he got to heaven? Mm-hmm. So a lot of the biblical stories are grounded in this mystical tradition of being able to sense things that aren't necessarily available to the five senses that we have here, which would be our eyes, our ears, nose, mouth, and then our sense of touch. But when we're in a place that is expanded outside of the box of space and time, that's when we have other perceptions. It's a deeper perception, another sense perception. And it's very hard to describe it using language, because it's an experiential experience. So the language always seems to fall short of the actual experience itself.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the things that happened to me were what we would call psychic
mm-hmm.
Phenomena. And I had gained clairvoyance, which is the ability to see things before they happened, clairsentience, the ability to feel things before they happened, clairaudience, the ability to hear things before they happened, and I could do a lot of things that sound crazy. I guess they sound crazy because, For the first few months, I could put my hands on books, and all of the information on the books, in the books, flew into me as though I had written them myself, so I didn't actually have to read them, because I was so connected to this superhighway of consciousness, and I was so connected to every other living creature in the universe that I knew exactly what was in the books. When I went into houses of prayer or worship, and I put my hands on the ancient texts, I was brought to a place of complete knowing and understanding for the first time in my life what those texts were about. And basically, they were all stories of mystical experiences where we're brought into the very point of life that we're in. It's in that pause, in that very minute, that we can access divinity. And so some of the things that you mentioned earlier about my sister-in-law, when my body started to shake, I was already having some of my energy centers blasted open. And as a result of my energy centers, and I know that they call those energy centers in some traditions, they call it the chakra system or the chakra system, which I had no prior intellectual knowledge of. But one of the things that I was starting to do was to be able to sense things before they happen. So when I sensed a burning in the back of my head, and I was very distraught for a number of days, and it was right before my sister-in-law fell off of her horse, split her head open in the very spot that I felt that heat and trembling, and died the next day from the blow. So all of those things sound magical in their experiences. However, the very, very most important thing that I have to tell audiences and anyone that wants to listen or anyone that's interested in reading my book is that none of those experiences are nearly as important as the one experience of the complete oneness of all of us. We're all in this together, and our only purpose here is to give and receive unconditional love. And we all get to do that in our own unique way. And it doesn't have to be in a big, grandiose way. It can be in a very small, quiet way. And in fact, divinity shows up in very small, quiet ways, in a microcosm as well as in grand ways, like when the sun rises and the sun sets, or the night sky changes and you start to watch the stars move in the sky, and the moon waxes and wanes, and the ocean brings the tides in and out. Those are miracles every day happening right in front of us. So I would encourage everyone to find those quiet spots on a daily basis, and it can just be a split moment of a recognition of something greater than you that's moving the universe, and to find that divine spark of energy in the miracles that are happening for all of us every day.
You know, I know that you have said that there's just not enough language to describe fully what you experienced, but I like the word knowings. I think there's something in that the awareness of what is, and the beautiful way in which you just described it almost poetically. I want to ask you about your mentors, your teachers, because there was Rabbi David Meyer, there was Reverend Patricia Long, and there was Dr. Badri Ricci?
Correct.
And,
Badri Ricci.
And
yeah.
they all had something to offer. What would you say about them?
Oh, they were really wonderful to me, all three of them. They never made me feel silly or foolish or crazy in any way. And in fact, they all gave me gems from their own spiritual, religious cultures. Each one of them supported me in a beautiful way. The first person that I spoke to was my rabbi. I was brought up as a Jew in the Jewish tradition, and so I called on him when I finally got some language around it, which was really several months after the experience. And he led me to Dr. Badri Ricci, who is an amazing psychiatrist and at the forefront of spirituality and medicine. So he was a tremendous help. And then I had a beautiful minister who had been a Catholic nun and had changed to transitioned to becoming a minister and left the Catholic Church. But she was also a powerhouse of information, and each one of them really grounded me in their own traditions and helped me understand on a much deeper level what had happened to me, because I had no language around it, and all three of them gave me starting points or jumping points where I could then move into literature that affirmed what had happened to me was real and true. And in fact, I knew in my heart of hearts that it was more real than anything I had ever experienced, and that it was the pinnacle of my lifetime here.
Mm-hmm. And this experience has empowered you, and you do wonderful spiritual healing. But I think it's really important to acknowledge, first of all, something very critical that most people don't want to look at, and that is that death is waiting for us all, and death is a part of life, and death is a beautiful thing. And most people don't get that.
Yeah, so after my experience, I had this incredible knowing, and when I call it a knowing, it's because there's not one shred of doubt inside of me. And it's hard to understand, and I completely get the people that are in the audience saying, you know, unless you've really experienced it, how can you understand it or know it? But for me, the knowing was so absolute and so enormous that I will never be afraid of death. And I can say to everyone and to my clients that I have had for the last 20 years that no one gets out of here alive. We all die. And in this particular culture, for the most part, we don't really talk about death and dying, but it is as exhilarating as birth. It's actually, for me, it's a rebirth into another level of consciousness. And the light that you see in other people's eyes, it's impossible to extinguish that light. So when I look into people's eyes and I connect with them on a higher plane or a deeper level, I know that that light has been around forever. And some people might understand it this way. Every so often in a lifetime you'll meet somebody that you know you've just known forever. The minute you look into their eyes, you see that light and you think to yourself, I know this person. I've known this person forever. I love this. I love this person. And you've just met them. So that would be a way in which people could perhaps relate to that idea that when we drop our bodies in the physical world, we then go on and on and on and on, because we come here as emanations from the light, the greatest light, the creator of all creations. We come from that light and we return to that light. And our spirits are impossible to extinguish.
Mm-hmm. You spend about 30 to 40% of the book with clients, various clients who tell their story about their healing experience with you. And I'd like to talk about a couple of the healings and then also the transition. Linda LeConte is the first one, and she had these cancerous tumors that melted away, and her doctors were astounded, and so were you.
Yes, I was. So you can kind of see that, you know, it was like I got hit over the head. There I was, taking care of 3 small children, doing my everyday life, going to the grocery store, and talking to my mother on the phone. And then I got hit over the head with this experience, and one thing after another kept presenting itself. And so I was shocked that those tumors melted. She had a tumor on her liver that you could actually feel. It was so big you could feel it with your hands. Mm-hmm. And it melted, which was miraculous. And no one's ever more surprised than I am that this stuff works. Mm-hmm. I'm still surprised every time something that sounds like hocus pocus happens to me or to one of my clients. I think to myself, really? This stuff really works? I'm such a skeptic by nature. And that's why I named my book The Reluctant Mystic, because it wasn't something that I could ever have made up. I didn't intellectually even know that any of this was possible. But in fact, for many years, I could put my hands on people and see inside their bodies with my hands. So I could see broken bones, I could see tumors, I could see organs, I could see the color and the texture. And I found that the best way for me to work with any of the dis-ease in the body was to transmit this visceral understanding of divinity, whatever you call that. You can call it anything you want. You can call it Mother Nature, you can call it Jesus, Buddha, God, Allah, whatever you call that energy. Because I had the incredible privilege of being able to channel that energy through my hands into other people, I found that that energy of unconditional love could heal everything that was supposed to heal. I could never heal it myself, and in fact, the minute I put my personality or my ego into any of it, the whole experience shuts down, because it has nothing to do with me. It has only to do with that incredible energy that I had the privilege of being in the presence of. And so when I transfer that energy into anyone that's on my healing table, it then knows automatically what to do. So sometimes there's a physical healing, sometimes there's not a physical healing, but there's always a healing of the spirit. Some people die, some people go on to live for much longer, some people die with a lot more peace inside of them, knowing that there is something out there that's guiding the universe. It's unconditional love.
Yeah, and I do want to come back to unconditional love, but I want to talk for a moment about people who face death without fear. And Sharon Himes is a great example of that. She really had health problems all her life and was just an angry loner until she encountered you.
Yeah, she was a beautiful spirit. Oh, that's the other thing. Everyone that comes to my healing table, I get to meet them on a higher plane, and I really get to feel and understand the essence of who they are. And she was particularly poignant in so many ways. She had an incredibly difficult life with tremendous physical struggles. And she came to see me that one time, and after that, she seemed to be a different person. And I don't know how and why and when and where divinity is going to touch someone, but for her it was a miraculous transformation. And when she died with peace in her heart.
Near the end of the book, you have some meditations, and I don't know if those are the guided meditations that we can find on iTunes, but I'm using one of them, the Healing Potion meditation myself, because I have some sciatic pain right now. What would you say about your meditations and what you're offering there?
I would say that meditation is an incredibly healing practice all on its own. And the meditations that I have recorded that are on my website are there for healing purposes only. So the healing potion that you're using, that particular meditation I use with a lot of my cancer patients, or cancer clients, because I'm not a medical professional, I'm not a doctor, I'm not trained as, I don't have those letters after my name, so I can't even call them patients, but I can call them clients, and very often they turn out to be wonderful friends. But that particular meditation is used because it employs all of the five senses. So you're called to use your favorite color, your favorite sound, your favorite scent, and the emotion of unconditional love. And then you're invited to bring that healing potion inside and begin to wash and bathe and soothe whatever area of your body is hurting you or bothering you or is diseased. And it's this unconditional love, again, moving along the energy of unconditional love, like a school of fish moving in the same energy is that energy that many of us call God here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's through that healing, loving energy that I find each and every cell begins to calm down and to heal. And once the cells are reconnected to the source of unconditional love, then they start to remember who they are, and they begin to right themselves. They reconnect to their source, and they begin to fill with light and love. And then they start to divide and multiply and make more healthy cells, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, and it's fascinating. I do want to try. I know that it's difficult to find the words, but I do want to have you try and explain how, when the whole world was shaking inside you and you felt bliss and perfect peace and knew what unconditional love was from the inside out, and kind of knew things intellectually, like had access to all knowledge. We've talked with people with near-death experiences that have had this, but you've had it without having a near-death experience, and so I'm interested in the light pouring through you and how in the world you can describe that to anyone.
Oh, well, I guess I would say that I'd invite everyone to imagine something that they really, really love, a person, a pet, an experience, a place, and then employ all of your senses. What does that experience feel like when you're there? Like for me, I'll give you an example. My favorite place in the whole world is on these enormous rocks right in front of the house that I grew up in. And it's right adjacent to the ocean, so the ocean comes in and out. And when I go to my favorite place, I'll go there and I'll feel what it feels like to be in that place. You know, what are the textures around me? What are the smells? What does the salt sea air smell like? What are the sounds there? The sounds of the ocean, the sounds of the seagulls. What are my memories of being in that place? And there's so many happy memories of being in that place. For me, that's a place where I connect deeply with what I call God. And when I go to that place inside of my heart, I know without a shred of doubt that there's something greater out there that's helping me in my journey here on earth. My experience on the table was one of complete and utter bliss. It was of unspeakable beauty and enormity. Trying to describe it, I've described it as best I could in my book. The entire physical world melted, and I knew without a shred of doubt that the only reason I was here on earth was to be of service to and through that energy, that unconditional love. And I would encourage everyone to find a little spot in every day to be still. I know that prayer is very often thought of as asking for guidance, and it's through meditation and stillness that we actually hear the guidance.
Mm-hmm.
And so the stillness comes at the end of your exhalation, but before your inhalation.
Mm-hmm.
This great pauses in life come at the end of one thought, but before the beginning of the next thought. And it's in these pauses, these built-in pauses that are with us all the time, that I invite people to rest in. And that's where you will feel, hear, understand, know the emptiness and the perfection of divinity.
Absolutely beautiful. Your words are true poetry. We've been talking with Nancy Torgove Clasby. The book is The Reluctant Mystic, an autobiography and awakening. It's a good read. It's an easy read. I recommend it strongly. I'm your host, Dr. John Cook. I remind you, if you don't hear our regular broadcast and the 4 times we appear on the National Public Radio affiliate 88 FM in the Rio Grande Valley, you can also catch up with us on YouTube, Good Books Radio, Strong and Cook. I'm your host, Dr. John Cook. Thanks for listening.